Hello, dear students. Welcome to What, Why, How, a daily initiative by IAS Baba, where we take up a daily current affair or an editorial and we try to declutter it in 10 minutes or less. The topic that I've chosen for today is regarding the Rohingya crisis that is happening in our country. Or, as a matter of fact, what is India's commitment to these refugees as expressed in certain international treaties? Now, to understand this topic, first you have to understand who the Rohingyas are. Now, in the country of Myanmar, you have majority of Buddhist population and the minority population over there belong to the Muslim religion. In the Muslim religion, you have a group of people called as your Rohingyas. Now, primarily, the Rohingyas were approximated to be almost at 2.8 million in your Myanmar. And thereafter, sometime around the 1970s, because they are a minority population over there, they started getting persecuted on different fronts. It initially started off with people saying that, or the nationalist, the Buddhist nationalist, and the government saying that the Rohingyas cannot get admission in local schools, the Rohingyas could not travel to different areas, the Rohingyas, if they had to start a business, they had extensive, complicated regulations that they had to follow. And all in all, it was the kind of discrimination that they were facing. But this discrimination, which started off in an area called as the Rakhine state, slowly started to spread off into different areas. And very soon, wherever Rohingyas were situated in Myanmar, they started getting persecuted. Now, one of the first levels of persecution was there was a military crackdown that was happening from October 16 to January 2017. And later on, from August 2017 also, this was going on happening. When the crisis became extremely difficult, the Rohingyas started moving into countries like Bangladesh, Thailand, etc. And India also became a destination for them to move on. Currently in India, you have 22,500 Rohingya refugees, but I have to tell you, these are just very informal estimates that are given by several NGOs. Now, coming to their condition in India, what has happened is there have been several reports about how the Indian government is trying to send back the Rohingya refugees, how the Indian government's camps, the refugee camps that are there in India, have extremely dehumanizing conditions that make it extremely difficult for the Rohingyas to survive in India. And it is at this context that you have to understand what is actually India's obligation to these refugees. What exactly does India need to do for these refugees? Now, to understand India's role, you first have to understand what is the International Convention. Internationally, there is a 1951 Refugee Convention and the 1967 Rules or Protocol of it. Now, I have to tell you, India is not a signatory to both of these. Neither the 1951 Refugee Convention or the 1967 protocol, India is not a signatory to it. These protocols have a principle called as principle of non-refoulement. Non-refoulement means if at all any country has had refugees in them, they cannot send back the refugees when it is very clear that these refugees would go back to their original country and there they would face persecution or torture. Because this is a human rights thing. You know very well that they would have danger, so you shouldn't be sending them back. Now, the 1951 convention has said that even countries which are not signatories of the convention or the protocol, they are bound by these principles because it's a customary law. Customary law means that you will be abiding by it because it is the right thing to do. It is the convention that is being done. Now, these are the principles, but as I told you, India is neither a signatory to the convention. India is not a party to international conventions like Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, International Convention for the Protection of All Persons of Forced Disappearance. India is not a signatory to any of these things, and because of this, India says that India is not bound by the principle of non-refoulement. On the other hand, in India, whenever there are refugees, India tries to regulate them using domestic legal frameworks like the Foreigners Act, Passport Act, etc. And according to these acts, they are not even called as refugees, they are called as illegal migrants. Now, to make things even more clear, in India, whenever you have refugees, they are bound by the right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution. But any other fundamental right, which says that they have the right to reside or to settle in India, these rights are not given to them. Further, very recently, I can give you an example where the Delhi High Court has said that the Rohingya refugee children cannot even be admitted into local schools. Now, India also says that India's certain other judgments, like the Vishaka judgment, National Legal Service Authority versus Union of India judgment, all of these say that in the absence of any domestic legislation on a matter, in this case, when it comes to refugees, we do not have any proper domestic legislation also regarding them. So, in that case, any international convention that is there should be applied to these things. We have also not done that. Further, there is a convention against torture that we are signing, but in that convention also India has just signed it and not ratified it. Again, making it clear that India is not bound by any of these principles. So then what has to be done? Now the current situation is that India keeps shifting its refugee policy regarding India's whatever is India's friendship with a certain country. India changes its refugee policy. This is the reason why Tibetans in India and Sri Lankan Tamils in India are treated in a much more better condition than the Rohingyas of Myanmar. This has to change. For a country that is trying to be a global superpower, we have to have proper refugee policies, and you should also be able to gain legal representation for refugees and to stop any dehumanizing conditions. Human rights should not be pertained or should not be contained with the boundaries of a country, but should be applied to anyone considered as a human. So I hope you've understood this issue in detail, and I hope you have a judgment on what is the right thing. On other hand, Merry Christmas to all of you. Have a fun and very happy Christmas day. Until we meet again, take care and happy learning.